Oh, man. How about this is one of those years where if any of these three were in any other year, they'd be all probably slam dunks to win the award. Tua, I think we got a taste of what he could do at the here in Atlanta last year in the national championship is kind of a precursor for the year that he would have, and just went on to have just an incredible year and just in command. I thought he and Mike Locksley together so many big numbers, and most of the time he didn't even play in the second half. So just an outstanding year of reading coverage and getting the ball out accurately and on time. Dwayne Haskins at Ohio State did things that school's never seen. I thought it was a transition period for Ohio State because they went from more of a running style with J.T. Barrett, which was effective, to now throwing it 50 times a game, which is something that school really has never seen. And he, I think, as the year went on, I think he got more and more comfortable with his role, not just throwing for big numbers, but I think he started to be more of a leader. And I think, like anybody, once you get more experience, you start to become more confident. And I think the Maryland game, even though he's putting up huge numbers, I thought the Maryland game late in the year where he had to scramble, remember that was a game that they got pushed, and he had to, I think, really assert himself a little bit more. And I think that could be a turning point in his career, really. But just a monster year. And then what Kyler Murray did, how do you replace Baker Mayfield and actually raise the bar? But he somehow was able to do that this year. I'm of the belief that Lincoln Riley right now, not just in college, but pro and college, maybe the most innovative mind in the sport, did amazing things with Baker Mayfield. Then he gets Kyler Murray, who can throw it, but also can run around and make plays. And I've just been impressed where he doesn't always rely on his feet. He can throw from the pocket, patiently read coverage. And here's a guy that's been a top 10 draft pick and is able to put that on the back burner and focus on having a huge year. And I think what's interesting about the race is while Tua started to go up against LSU and Mississippi State and even where he got hurt in the last game, Kyler Murray just kept putting up big numbers. So I think maybe middle of November, people, if you asked them to cast a vote, they would probably have been Tua, and maybe even a landslide. And now down the stretch, I think that's what makes this weekend is interesting is that Kyler Murray just kept putting up big numbers. And now there's some people who believe Kyler Murray could win it. So I think it'll make it for a lot of anticipation and fun going into the weekend.
How do you feel about big talks about the Big Ten being more popular than the SEC right now? What's your opinion?
I mean, how many people, is it over 900 people who vote in it? And I think they do as good of a job as they can of trying to give the votes, not just to the most populated area. I think they try to look at a lot of the regions and try to, the best that they can, try to see if they can make it even. I think over the years there have been candidates in the Midwest, whether it's been at a Notre Dame or a Michigan or Ohio State, and candidates out west and even in the South. And I love to go back on the back end after you see who won and see how each region broke down. And it really doesn't stand out to me that the Midwest region carries that much more weight necessarily than what you might see from the South. So if you look at the Midwest with Dwayne, and then you look at where the other candidates are, obviously in the South, I think what happens is what happens in the Northeast, what happens in the West could go a long way and determine, because as you know, you get 3 points for first place, 2 points, and 1 point. And I want to see what other candidates who are in fourth and fifth might have stolen points away in certain regions from guys that ultimately end up who can win the whole thing.
Kirk, you've been outspoken about Georgia and how playoff shook out. Do you feel like this is possibly one domino that could be the next step towards going to 6 teams or maybe even 8?
I hope so. I used to be a 4-team guy, and I at this point I would like to see 8, with it being not automatic qualifiers. I think we have to do away with the conference championships, which I think will be tough for the SEC to come to grips with, because they're the one every year where it's great. It doesn't even matter who's in it. And for people who are from the South and the Southeastern Conference, that game's probably more important for some people than even the playoff. And for people in the Big Ten and Pac-12 and ACC and Big 12, it's hard for them to understand that, but it is. And so to tell you're going to tell the SEC you're no longer going to have a conference championship game. They might not buy into that. But I personally, if we can figure that part of it out, I would love to see us do away with the conference championships, go to 8 teams, and not have automatic qualifier. Because I still think you have to have a system that rates the top 8 teams, not say, okay, the best group of 5 team automatically is in. I wouldn't be in favor of that. If they move up into the top 8, put them in, but not just to, again, be politically correct. We need the best 8 teams. Well, I know Mel really well, going back to his days at Ohio State. Great coach, communicates very well with not just the secondary, but the entire defense. It was a matter of time until he was going to become a head coach. I think in this particular case, the fact that Kirby's a defensive guy, I think helps this defense get ready for what they're going to be facing in their bowl game. And you know, I think Kirby is, you know, no matter who the defense coordinator is, just like when Nick Saban's a head coach and Kirby's his defensive coordinator, Nick's pretty heavily involved in putting up that game plan defensively. I think it'll be the same thing as far as getting ready for Texas. The challenge, I think, is apathy. You know, it's the Pac-12, it's Colorado. There's a lot of stuff going on besides college football. It's been a long time. I mean, they had a good year a couple years ago, but it's been really a long time since Colorado has been the team that they were in the latter part of the 80s into the early part of the 90s when they were a perennial power for Coach McCarthy. So I'd love to see it. He knows what he's getting into. He can recruit, which is a big thing. I'm sure I haven't seen or talked to him yet about his staff that he's going to put together. But that's always such a big part of it is you've got to find recruiters. And when you're at Colorado and Boulder, you've got to be able to get over to Southern California. You got to be able to get into Texas and go back to your roots and other places that you and your staff have been. So I want to look forward to seeing who he hires as his offensive coordinator. He knows defense inside and out, and who he hires as recruiters. Because if you look at the roster at Colorado and compare it to some of the top 5, top 10 teams, obviously they have a long way to go. So that's going to be the biggest thing. But they've got to get inroads into Texas and Southern California.
Last question. We got our players coming next. Number one, I know you're going to call the game, just kind of quick right now. Clemson, Notre Dame, and Cotton Bowl. And the second part would be your son's going to play for that at Clemson. How much input did you have, and how pleased were you that they're going to play?
Well, the matchup itself, I think, is going to be very, very good because I think Notre Dame is coming in with a great deal of confidence. I've been around their team quite a bit this year. I think Ian Book going into that lineup, along with Dexter Williams, who was sat out the first 4 games, they have a balanced attack, and they've got big, tall, wide receivers on the outside, and Ian Book knows how to put the ball accurately and where they can go up with their catch radius and make a play on the ball. Doing some Clemson games, the one area I would try to attack them is throwing the football down the field before that pass rush can get to you. And so they're going to have to try to deal with Ian Book and what he can do. The other side of the ball, I think Notre Dame is going to have their hands full with the athletic ability. They've got to be able to try to get after Trevor Lawrence to try to have any chance at all of slowing down that Clemson attack. I think the Clemson offense right now, executing as well as anybody. I think the big playability that they have at receiver and running back, good luck. I mean, if you don't affect their rhythm, then you're going to have to score with them because it's just hard to score with Clemson. As far as my boys, yeah, I mean, this is they went to a football camp there this summer, had a great time. I think raised a couple eyebrows with the coaches, and they stayed in touch with my boys. And for me, there's maybe 7 or 8 coaches that I would maybe green light for my kids to go and play for in this kind of situation where they're preferred walk-ons. And this would be one, probably the first one that I would say that's a great spot to go. So tickled to death and looking forward to it.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Guys, have a good week.